Assalamu alaikum, Muna. How are you today?
Good. How are you? Alaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful that you're able to join us. And I know that you have a very interesting story to share. Would you please introduce yourself to our viewers?
My name is Mona Alaouie. I am a proud mother of one little boy. Well, he's not so little, but in my eyes, little.
Yes, and about your work. You do very noble work.
Thank you. I am an early childhood educator. I'm also a co-founder of a nonprofit based here in Dearborn, Michigan that helps families with special needs. And I am currently pursuing my bachelor's. I'm sorry, my master's. I will be graduating, inshallah, in 2 months, in May.
It's very exciting. Wish you all the best in that.
Thank you.
So let's rewind. Your son now is how old?
16.
16. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's rewind to before 16, prior to 16 years ago when you were married. And if you could just share with us, how was it when your marriage started to unravel? And at what point was that? Was that before your pregnancy? Was it after your pregnancy? If you'd like to go into more detail.
Um, so, we were married out of college. Um, we had a strong friendship prior to marriage. There was no reason to not think our marriage was going to, last. Um, I got pregnant the second year of marriage, and pretty, typical pregnancy. I love being pregnant. I embraced it. It wasn't an easy pregnancy, but no pregnancy ever is. And he was born. He was the light of all of our lives. Shortly, about 13 months, when my son was about 13 months, we started to notice there was a little delay in his development, started to pursue it. Um, and then his dad left when my son was about 2 years and 2 months. And that's kind of where everything started to unravel. So we were in the beginning stages of pursuing what health conditions and what, health concerns we had for my son's development, and then also trying to come to terms with that he just left.
And if I understand correctly, because I've heard your story, that he didn't leave as in announce a divorce, but that he had left the country and you still thought that the marriage was continuing. Is that
Yeah.
right?
hmm We, at the time, I had moved to Florida about 6 months prior to him leaving the country. He had gotten a job in Florida, so we moved to Florida, my son and I started the process there, going to doctors and figuring out what's wrong, which was not easy, being a Hajib, we're pretty lucky and fortunate here in Dearborn, where being a Muslim is part of the norm, and practicing your faith, and especially being a Hajib, there's nothing that you need to think twice about when you walk out of your home. In Florida, it was different. I was definitely an outsider. I was definitely stared at, and not, it was different for them, my neighbors and all. And so pursuing um, my son's condition there was a little more challenging, also because I wasn't familiar with the city or the people. Whereas in Dearborn, I know every doctor, I know every therapist, I know where to go and what to do. So I definitely felt more of a challenge in Florida. But we started the process in Florida. And one of the advice that we received in Florida was to have him around children as much as possible, because children learn from children. Because at this time, they weren't sure what was going on. They weren't sure if it was just a delay. They weren't sure if, Lasam Halai was going to be deaf because he wasn't talking. So there was a lot of what ifs and unknowns in his development. And so, based off their recommendations, I came back home for that summer. It was summer of 2009. I came home and, spent the summer around my family and nieces and nephews and other kids. And while I was here, he decided to leave from Florida to Lebanon. It was an unexpected trip. Um, I didn't think anything of it because his family's back home, thought that's what he wanted to go do. But while he was there, he was supposed to come back here, pick us up, and then we all go back to Florida together. The day before he was supposed to come back to the States, I was sitting with my grandma, I had nothing, there was no, reason to think he wasn't coming home. I was sitting with my grandma at the time, and we were making a list of all the things I need to take back home with me because Ramadan was coming. And Florida doesn't have the luxuries that Dearborn has with foods and meats and whatnot. So I was making that list. Stuff was packed, ready to go home the next day. And the next day, I messaged him because I needed confirmation on the items that I was getting. One of the items needed a deposit, the meat order. So I messaged him and said, I need to make this deposit. I need to pick up the meat order. And I got a response that said, there's no need, I'm not coming back. And that was, to tell you it's a shock, that was an understatement, because there was nothing leading up to that from my perspective. There was no reason for me to expect that, to think he would do that, to even know what's coming next. I mean, we had appointments waiting when we get back to Florida for my son. So that was a huge blow. And then things just kind of started spiraling after that.
Wow, that's a really heavy blow. So you were in Florida, so what was the emotional impact for you?
So at this time, I'm, in my dad's home. Um, I don't really have a lot of stuff because I only brought stuff to spend, the summer in Dearborn. All of our stuff is back home, back to our home in Florida. I have no job because I had left my job when I moved to Florida. I lost my health insurance when I moved to Florida because I got health insurance from his work in Florida. So now my son doesn't have the much needed insurance to get, the help that he needed. Um, I had nothing. Like, I was literally left with nothing. And I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions. Um, I think I was supposed to maybe have a feeling of rage and anger, but it was more just numbness because I couldn't accept that he wasn't coming back. And then I also couldn't pause because with my son and what ended up looking to be a developmental delay, intervention is key. The earlier you start intervention, the better. So I also couldn't dwell on the situation because I needed to help my son. And so it was honestly the next year, actually next few years, um, of just black. We didn't get a divorce right away. He wasn't here, and it didn't look like he was coming back. I tried to communicate a lot. I tried to reach out to his family, people that knew him, to find out what's going on. Why is he not coming back? What's his plan? Um, is it something he's going through? Will he be back? I kept having that hope that he would come back. But the picture became clear after a while that this was something he wanted to pursue. He left to pursue a job opportunity in Africa and Lebanon. And it was something that he had planned that I didn't know about. And so he left. And he turned into someone that was unrecognizable to me. He was not, to think it like put me aside for his own son, he was unrecognizable. Didn't really ask or be involved with any of the steps of what's happening with my son here. There was just, he was gone. In a lot of ways, I had to mourn him as if he, was deceased because he was gone. And I didn't have that physical closure of him here, for me to have that, conversation with and say what's going on and just kind of have that. I didn't have that. So in my mind, I was married to someone who was distant. And I lived that lie for a couple years. Anyone that asked, I said, oh yeah, he's away at work. He's away at work. And that's what I raised my son on. Telling me, yeah, Papa's away at work. Papa's away at work. He's working. But obviously my son reached an age where he was aware that, okay, where is he? Um, and it was about 2 years later that I finally was ready to accept everything that he had done and ask for the divorce. Um, my entire family was very surprised that I finally reached that step. Um, they were all present when the sheikh came to the house. They were waiting for me to change my mind. They would have supported me either way, but they just knew it was very hard for me to get to that point where I'm ready. In every way, I had a sheikh tell me, it was a few months after, he said, but it's been 6 months. He's abandoned you. So in every way, he's already not, in the eyes of Islam, a husband, a father, because he's not present in any way, financially, physically, emotionally, every way. But I guess I just needed to come to terms with that at my own time. And it took me about 2 years. And it took me a lot of back and forth. Um, looking back, I tried. So I can't say, oh, I wish I did this or I wish I did this. Because even after everything that he did, and a lot of, truths came out after he left, a lot of people came out with things that I didn't even, it's almost as if he was living a double life. Um, I finally came to terms with, okay, the man that I loved and the man that I married is no longer. Um, some people tell me, he had to have been faking it the whole time. I don't think so. We were married for 4, going on 5 years. I don't think you can live a double life the entire time, but maybe I'm still being naive. I don't know. I just don't think, I want to believe that was real. I want to believe his love for his son was genuine. I want to believe our love was genuine. At the end of the day, I think life took the best of him, and exposed the worst of him. And unfortunately, he followed that side and not the good side. Um, and that's just a really quick, brief summary of what happened those first few years.
So when you're talking about the emotional experience you had, you said that you had numbness and then you said that you were mourning. So did you experience any anger at any stage?
Not initially. The anger came later. The anger came later when my son became more aware and my son had more questions and I had no answers. That's where I became very angry because I was hit with the reality of, what did you do to us? Why did you do this to us? Why did you do this to him? The reality that my son was being raised without a father was the part that really made me the most angry. Um, had it been just me, I could accept it. I could, because at the end of the day, I'm a strong believer that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us with everything. And we are more than, we should be expecting to lose everything in this dunya. Nothing here is forever. So I can accept that part. But seeing my son Muslim is the part that got me the most angry because he's a child. He doesn't deserve it. And I think that's where my anger kicked in.
I find it very interesting that when he said he's not coming back, he didn't actually tell you he wants a divorce. And it
No.
just kind of lingered on for, as I heard you, it was 2 years until
Yeah.
you're the one who had to say, hey, I think that we should be getting a divorce. So what do you think that was about? Do you think that he actually intended on resuming the marriage in some way, or?
I think his decision was also taken. I don't think he thought it all out. I don't, and I'm going to give him more credit here, maybe than I should, but I don't think he thought it out. I think he was pursuing one way, assuming that everyone here would just wait or would just, I don't know. I really don't know what he was thinking. At one time, I entertained the idea of going and following him there. But then you think of Africa and you think of the medical, support that they have, and knowing what my son needed here, but I was still willing to do it. And I entertained that idea and I proposed that idea to him, but I wasn't welcomed with kindness. Again, it wasn't the man that I had married. It wasn't every solution I presented. I was given a very mean version and a very mean response from him. So, but I kept trying. And this is where I think, you know, in a marriage, sometimes you have to put your pride aside and you have to put your ego aside because you need to make it work. And if it took me putting my pride and ego aside and following him just to keep my home, I was willing to do that. And that's not because I'm a unique person. It's because that's what I believe the foundation of marriage is. You do what you have to do to make it work. But there comes a time, and this is where, I mean, Allah Akbar fina, and if he presented, I mean, divorce is not haram. We know it's makruh, but it's not haram. So it is a solution. It is an option for a reason. And I believe in my situation, it was the solution. It wasn't the solution I wanted. It wasn't the solution that I strived for. Um, until this day, I mean, people that don't know me, I never present myself as I hate saying the word divorced because that doesn't define me. It's not what I wanted in my life, but it's okay because I didn't do anything wrong. And
You absolutely,
Islamically,
yeah, you absolutely did not do anything wrong.
yeah.
And even the fact that uh, people are still concerned about the
Mhm.
associative negative word, connotation with divorce is really problematic. It shows that then as a culture, the community, we still have to work on that because in the prophetic time, there was no negative association whatsoever with the term divorced. It was just
Yes.
a very natural and normal thing. And often
Mhm.
when women were still in their iddah, in their waiting period, they would be promised a subsequent marriage right away. It wasn't a thing. So,
Yeah. And it took me, I mean, again, I lived a lie for a few years saying I was married. Um, and I don't know why, looking back, it took me as long as it did, because like you said, I did nothing wrong. Um, I knew my duties as a wife. I knew my duties as a mother. I knew my duties as a Muslim woman. Um, so I know I did not neglect any of that. And I know, and I think this is something that, when people are searching for things in life and pursuing, whether it be a job or whether it be finances, I mean, and in this case, one of us sacrificed everything in the pursuit of something that this world could offer, which is finances or a job or, business and whatnot. But that all goes away, you know? At the end of the day, I think the value is I look at my son, I have no shame. I can look him in the eyes, he knows there's nothing that his mom did that is not okay. Um, and that to me means the world. Because there was a time where I didn't know if my son was going to know that, because I raised him to love his father and I raised him, to not know any of what we went through. I sheltered him as much as possible to the point where, when my son got older, not got mad at me, but he was like, "You're not being honest with me. And his anger started turning towards me because he's like, "Well, you're not telling me when to," like, the stories weren't making sense to him, which he has his own mind and he's growing, and he realized that the stories that I was fabricating to him as a child didn't add up. Um, and he went on a pursuit of his own to find out the truth, and he did. Children always do. They find out what they want to find out, and he did, and he found out a lot of things that I didn't ever want him to know, that I was hoping to protect him from forever, because you know there are some things children don't need to know. Um, but at the end of the day, now we're at a point, my son and I, where he's a young adult, and we're very honest with each other. And looking back, should I have been honest from the beginning? I don't know. I don't know which way to encourage parents, because I think at the end of the day, we do the best we can with what's before us. And I don't know, I don't know if I made the right decision to fabricate things to him and put him in a bubble and protect him from everything. Because at the end of the day, he found out everything. But then I think, okay, maybe he found out things at an older age where he was able to process it better. Whereas at a young age, he maybe couldn't have processed it. So maybe I did protect him in a sense. I don't know. And I don't know the right answer to that of how to talk to your children about it because every child is different, every situation is different. I think, tawakkul is huge and having tawakkul in Allah to help guide you. And that's exactly what I did. I don't know, there were a lot of things that I winged it in the moment. He asked me a question, I winged it in the moment. I don't know. Again, I didn't have a roadmap of how to be, and this is another word that I don't like to throw as a single mom, um, because I look at it as I'm a mom. I'm not, single mom, married mom, whatever. I'm a mom.
Well, this was going to be my next question. I was going to use the word single mom. I was going to ask you, so then what was it like for you where you had this child who had these developmental challenges at the time and you were a single mother?
Mhm.
What was that like? I want to know everything in terms of what was it like for you emotionally, in terms of the actual support system that you had?
So I was fortunate to have an amazing support system, amazing, amazing. Starting with my family and then starting with the professionals around me. Um, Being that I was in the education field, I was surrounded and blessed to be surrounded by professionals that knew the system, knew what to do, helped me get the intervention in place for my son. Um, and then support system for my family was unmatched. My father stepped into that father role and left the grandpa role aside quickly. And that was huge. We all laugh because my son is more like my dad than any of my brothers. My son picked up all the interest that my dad has. He's a handyman. He knew how to use a screwdriver and a hammer at the age of 5 and 6. Like he is my dad's son in every way, if that makes sense. Because he spent the most time with my son. And my son is obsessed with his grandpa. And then I have the best of the best brother-in-laws and brothers um, that also supported my son. So he, in a lot of ways, was very fortunate to have that. In regards to going through those, my son's first 5 years were the most challenging because, again, we had all those unknowns. He ended up having a developmental delay and an expressive receptive disorder, which was more like a fancy way of saying speech delay, which, alhamdulillah, by the grace of God, and it was a miracle of God that he outgrew all of those delays by the age of 5 and a half. First grade, we were discharged from speech. And then he later just got a diagnosis. And I say just, not that ADHD is a light diagnosis, but looking at what we were looking at, and we were looking at all kinds of things. We were looking at, is it autism? Is he deaf? Is he going to be cognitively impaired? Is he going to have a language delay for the rest of his life? Like we didn't know. So getting the answers to the unknowns meant going through a lot of appointments and a lot of conversations. And you have to repeat the story over and over to every therapist, to every doctor, to every specialist. So it was extremely exhausting. Um, and the part to me that was most emotionally exhausting is even though like my family all would ask me, how'd the appointment go? How did the appointment go? It's different than when you come home at night and your spouse, who's the other parent, who's just as invested typically in your child, is there for that support of, yeah, it was a hard day today, and then um, having that emotional support of giving you that strength to go on, or knowing someone else is carrying that same, I don't want to say burden because it's not a burden, but that same weight on their shoulders as you. Um, that was hard for me because no one else was carrying that burden. Not burden, I'm sorry, I shouldn't use burden, that weight on their shoulder. Even though, again, my family was very involved, but it's different for the parent. Um, Knowing I'm the only one carrying that on my shoulders and knowing that I'm the only one making these decisions was very scary because what if I made the wrong decision? And there were times, where I had to make a decision of, okay, do I want to put him in this school? Do I not? Do I put him in this? Do I not? Is this the best therapist? Is this the best neurologist? Do I go with this opinion? Do I get a second opinion? I had to make those decisions, and of course I consulted the professionals around me and, my family, but at the end of the day, I'm the only name on those papers. So I'm the only one signing those papers. And so it was very overwhelming and very draining emotionally. And I think that was the hardest part and still is because I'm still making decisions for my son, Um, the older they get, the harder it gets. So they were right. Because now we're dealing with all the teenage years, fun years. And alhamdulillah, I'm extremely blessed that he is a very, very grounded kid. My main wish for him is that he stays close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and alhamdulillah he is. He's at an age where I don't have to remind him to pray. He prays on his own. But he is making, those typical teen mistakes that all teenagers make. And so I'm finding myself having to be bad cop and good cop. And that's very hard. That's extremely hard. It's honestly harder now than it was when he was younger because, there's something about that father authoritative figure. When they discipline, and my son is a son. I think if he was a daughter, it would have been different. But the son sometimes, responds more to that male figure than his mom. So me having to balance both and be intimidating to him, but then also very loving and caring, is very hard to balance. But I'm doing the best I can, and I hope he grows to be a good, healthy young man, and that's all I can ask for. Um, I do, call in my dad for support. I'm like, Dad, do you know what he did at school today? My dad steps in and has that lecture. Or my brother-in-law, my brother. So I definitely use them as my male role models for my son. And I know we're very lucky because not everyone has that. And I know that there are some women doing it without any male role models around. And so that's why I count my blessings because as hard as it is, it could be so much harder. I always remind my son, because my son was also raised to know all of his history in regards to his health. So he knows the first 5 years, there was a lot of unknowns. And he knows that he was blessed with a miracle at age 5, because age 5 is when we had the last appointment. It was 2 months before his 5th birthday. And that's where they removed a lot of question marks and unknowns and said, no, he does not have this. He does not have this. He does not have this. So I told him, Allah believes something in you. And I've raised him to believe that. And I want him to always be fortunate that he was a miracle. And I hope he continues to give back because I'm living the rest of my life giving back. And that's what made me start the nonprofit that I'm a co-founder of.
It's incredible. You say it's a miracle because it was not normal for children who have those delays to have such a transition so dramatically, right?
Yes, it was unheard of. When he was 2.5 years old, almost 3, no, he was 2 and 4 months. I sat with a group. I was at a table with like 6, 7 professionals, and they were telling me the reality of his delay. That at that time, he was 2 years and 4 months, and the results of the evaluation were developmentally he was 5 months old. And so, looking at a 2 year and 4 months old, developing as if he's 5 months old, that's a huge gap. And so when they said that, I was like, okay, so what does his future look like? What do we got to do, to catch up? And they all kind of paused and looked at me like, did you not hear what we just said? There's a huge delay. And I was like, yeah. So what do we got to do? How do we, catch him up? What do we, and so that's where, like, I was just always looking at, okay, I know this is a reality, but what do I need to do to make it better? And the odds were against him. And she told me that day, she looked at me, she talked to me in a very slow manner and said, your son is 2 years and 4 months old and he's developmentally 5 months old. So for him to catch up, he'd have to develop at twice the pace of a typical developing child, and your son isn't. And so that was a reality. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. We'll just have to work twice as hard and 4 times as hard and whatever we need to do. Um, and then even at his appointment, that final appointment when the doctor, she looked at me and she looked, she sat for like 2 hours with my son and did a whole evaluation and took all these notes. And she, when she came up with the results, she looked at me and she said, what did you do? She's like, this isn't the same boy that was before me. And, she's obviously a non-Muslim. And I just looked up and I pointed up and I go, it was God. And she said, what do you mean? I go, this was God. I go, because I didn't do anything that other mothers don't do. And I didn't do anything other than what I'm capable of doing. For you to tell me these results, there's only one answer, because scientifically, medically, you can't explain it. So I can explain it, and it was God. And she smiled. And that day she wrote on the paper, and I still have it in my nightstand. And the reason why I have it in my nightstand is because if I'm ever having a hard day, I like to reflect and remember where we used to be. And on that paper, it says, would have given a diagnosis of autism, no longer see signs or symptoms. And then it goes on to explain, where he's at now. And it's like literally 2, 3 sentences. And um, just those 2, 3 sentences. And then there's a lot of other stuff. But I have that part folded in my nightstand and I always look at it. I always reflect on it, because we could have been going down a totally different path. And I would have been thankful for whatever path we would have went down. But I know for whatever reason, Allah guided us to this path. Um, but I never want to forget where we used to be. And I never want my son to forget where we used to be, even financially, even emotionally. We're definitely better now than we were then. We're not great, we're not comfortable, but we're better. Every year, every day, we're better than where we used to be. So I always, 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 like, the word alhamdulillah means something so much more to me now. As a teenager and in high school, I always said alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. But really, really understanding why we should say alhamdulillah, um, is what I really walked away with.
That's truly beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, what do you do? I was going to ask you about, we all have challenging days. What is it that keeps you emotionally well and sound? You seem to be somebody who's quite optimistic, mashallah, mashallah,
Try.
cheerful disposition. And so what do you do when things do feel like, wow, I'm having a really crappy day, or I'm going through a hard time?
Honestly, I'm blessed to be in a position to have families reach out almost daily that have a child with special needs. They reach out because of the nonprofit that we have. And so when I have a family reach out to me, and either with a follow-up and tells me, you know, I took your advice, I did this, look what my son is doing, look what my daughter's doing. Or I'm blessed to be in the education field. So I'm in early childhood. So when my students make progress, I look at those as all my daily blessings. Um, Allah put me in a position where I'm able to help others. I wish I could do more. And I'm nowhere near doing what we should be doing. But that, to me, honestly, is what keeps me emotionally grounded and sane, because there's a gazillion reasons to smile every day. So many reasons. You just have to look for them. And you don't have to look hard. They're right there. But there's so many reasons. I look at, my son at the end of the night, we communicate pretty well. So him just coming home and talking to me about his day, I'm always, always thankful that he has a voice, because he was, excuse me, he was nonverbal till he was about 3.5. So I'm always looking at those as my blessings every day.
So Muna, we know that research has shown that for people who are contributing, volunteering, helping others, that definitely boosts the level of happiness, right? Now,
Yeah.
what would you say to somebody out there who is not in a field of work where they are helping others, or they might not have a child, or they might not have family support, and they're going through a really hard time? What would you tell them? How do they make themselves more cheerful, happier, grateful?
I would tell them 2 things. One, I would tell them connect with your deen. connecting with your dean um, helps you find all the purposes in your day. When you simplify your life to the simple blessings that you know we have, you end up being content with where you're at. And then there are so many needs all around us. I happen to be, kind of like a magnet to the needs of children with special needs, or, children that, have some more struggles emotionally. So that's kind of where I go with helping. But there's so many needs. Volunteering at your local mosque, volunteering within your community. I support those studies because when you see what others are going through, knowing that you can potentially help, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. You don't need to have money to help others. You don't need to have, all these resources to help others. You just have to have compassion. You have to have compassion, and you just have to have ears to listen to their problems, and be able to support them. You'll be surprised. Support comes in the simplest ways. So yeah, definitely look for where there are needs within your community, and get active, because not only does it give you a purpose, but we're always looking for opportunities of ajr. We're always looking for opportunities to build our akhirah, because we know this life is temporary. So looking for ways to build our next life, definitely volunteering will help you with that.
Thank
I hope
you.
I answered correctly.
Yes, and I would like to switch. I'd like to switch back to you. I'm very curious about your your work journey, because
Mhm.
as a single mom, and I know you don't like that term, but
It's okay.
single mom, I know you had to think, wow, so I'm going to have to be financially independent, take care of my son. So what was that path that you pursued once your ex-husband was not in
Mhm.
the picture anymore? Hmm.
So that was probably the hardest, because prior to that, when I said I left my job to move to Florida, I was already in the school system. I was already working within the public school system. I had a very good job. Um, I had my own benefits, my 401k, everything. I was in college at the time, but I stopped because he was also in college, and so one of us had to stop so the other one can go full time. And we figured one would graduate, and then the second one would, start. Um, so I didn't finish my degree while married. So I didn't have my degree. I didn't have my job because I left it when I moved to Florida. So I didn't have much to go on when I'm going back into the work field. And I also had to have something extremely flexible because, again, my son's schedule was, we had appointments every day all over the place. So I needed something very flexible. So I had to almost, this is where, um, downgrade from where I was to where I am. And that was a reality that I also had to accept. And not that there's any shame in working in any field or doing it, but knowing where I was and where I am, it was taking steps backwards, not forward. Um, and so I started, the first step was to get my son health insurance. So I had to, and I had never sought for public assistance before, or government assistance. So I had to go and, apply for that, the whole EBT system, the Medicaid system, those all a system I was never a part of. So that was definitely very hard for me to sit through those, appointments, and you have to tell your story and why you're not working. And that was probably the first part of the journey that helped me get to the reality that I was in. Um, and so from there, I had to look for flexible jobs. So that meant looking at local businesses. I went and worked at a local kitchenware store as a cashier. I worked at a meat market for a few weeks. And then I found myself working at a supermarket. And that's where I ended up staying for about 10 years. I started off as a cashier. And in the beginning, I found myself, and I'm going to be very honest here and raw, that I was embarrassed because here I am, someone who used to work in the schools. I had my professional job. again, I had, all my benefits, and I was, going in the right direction in my life. And now here I am hitting rock bottom with nothing, and I'm working as a cashier. And so I never, I was a cashier in high school, as co-op, but not as an adult and with a child. It's just not where I saw myself. I ended up loving being a cashier, and it's probably one of the best, most rewarding jobs you can have, um, because you connect with your community. I ended up meeting so many people from my community, um, and I just ended up embracing being in the business world. It was a world that I was never exposed to, and it was very rewarding. And then I got to find a way to help, but in a different way. So I got to help, when I would see customers come in that had a child with special needs, and that child was not, behaving for them or sitting settled in the car, I was able to comfort that child while the mom shopped, or I was able to help in a different way. I got to see former students come in. So I got to connect with them and catch up with them. So I really just ended up finding all the right things with being a cashier. I got promoted in that position. I ended up being cashier manager, and then I ended up being with customer service. I ended up taking on a leadership role within this business world that I never thought I would be in. And they were very, very flexible with me. I got to leave to go get my son from the bus and come back. They fixed my schedule around his schedule. So they were very flexible with me. There was a lot of times I would go and come throughout my shift, whatever, if the school called me for my son, I'd have to leave and go get him and come back. So knowing that, I mean, this was a big blessing being part of a community, that I had that, again, that support again. And I felt Allah was just helping to make things easier for me. And so I started that, and then
Well,
it
Mona,
was in
I
two.
can cut you. What I extract from that incredible story is that we don't know where khair might lie.
Nope.
Like you might think, oh, I'm not going to do that. That's so not me. That's like below me. But you
Yeah.
pursue that path, and all these other things open up to you, and it's such a huge support system. So that's really
Yes.
incredible.
Yes, and it came from nothing, like literally working as a cashier, and then it opened so many other doors. Um, and it's just it really, I mean, looking back, those are some of the best years of mine. They didn't know. What's funny is, I did my first podcast a couple months ago, and a lot of my coworkers that I worked with at that time heard that podcast, and they were like, "Wait, you were going through that while we were working with you?" They had no idea that all of those, that those are some of the hardest days of my life personally, but at work, they had no idea. Um, and that's because they helped me get through it without even realizing it. And I formed some amazing relationships that I still carry with me today. We're still very close. I met some of the best people and made connections with people. It was just literally a job as a cashier, a job that I walked in, and I will say, like, I had my head in a way down, because I was like, this is my reality now. I'm working as a cashier. I became a single mom. I don't have anything. I was living with my family. I don't, like, we had no stability. It was just that job really, again, like going for the government assistance was one step, and then accepting that job was another step to me accepting my reality. And that's why, it took a couple years, and then finally realized, okay, this is my new norm. And then I lived that life for about 10 years or so. And then in 2019, with my family pushing me, I went back to finish my bachelor's. And going back, my advisor at the time said, "You were so close. Why did it take you so long to come back?" Because it took me about 15 years to come back to school. And I said, life just took me. And so I graduated in 2020 with my bachelor's, and it was the COVID graduation. So my son, he's so cute. He called Channel 7, which is a local news station, which was very embarrassing. But he called the local news station to tell them that I was graduating. And we didn't have a ceremony because it was COVID. So my family and my son, they put together a parade. And so he had me, I was walking out of the house to what I thought was a photo shoot. So I was wearing my cap and gown and we were leaving. And then that's where I saw like everyone come with, and then the reporters were there, and it was it was a huge moment because I promised my son that day that our lives are going to get better. And I promised him that we're we're going to do good and we're going to be okay, because now that I had the degree, sorry, now that I had my degree, I could stand on my feet very strong. Not that I wasn't standing strong before, but now I'm really strong, and now we're going to go out there in the real world and we're going to get that job and we're going to get those benefits and we're going to buy that house and we're going to buy that car and we're going to be okay. I'm not going to worry anymore, like check to check and live that very exhausting lifestyle, and even though the degree didn't promise me any of that, I mean, but I knew this was an accomplishment for me that wasn't easy, going to class and being a mom and working. There were times, my nieces would come to the house to watch my son so that I can go to class, and I'd have to drop off my son. It was hard, but we got through it, and I got the degree, and I graduated.
I do want to say that I'm so moved by your vulnerability, and I'm so proud of you. Honestly, I
Yeah.
think that you are so resilient and determined and brave, and at the same time, like in a state of shukr and alhamdulillah. So I'm just so grateful that you're willing to share something so personal with us. So just like the same.
Just kind of comes. um, and then, after that, I'm like, you know what? Let me get my master's. I already got my feet wet. And so I pursued my master's, which my family was like, really? And I'm like, I'm going to go for my master's. I'm going to do it. So I pursued my master's, and, it did take me a little bit longer because, again, I'm juggling work and everything. But alhamdulillah, I'm at the end. I graduate in 2 months, and, told my son, this is going to open more doors for us, and we're going to do more things. And, um, we're, our struggles are not over, even though, yes, I definitely encourage everyone to follow and pursue their education because that matters, but it's not everything, because I did do 10 years without my education and I did accomplish things. You know, I was able to get promoted from a cashier to cashier manager to customer service to being in leadership position in that job without a degree. So I could have continued that, but it wasn't my passion. My passion was children. My passion is education. And so that's why I went back. Um, because it was like an emptiness in my heart that I wanted to finish and pursue. And so whether you finish your education or you don't, there's always opportunity for growth. But for me, I needed to finish my education to finish that something I started. And my family played a big role on that because they're big on education and they wanted me to have that stability that they knew the degree would bring. Um, and after that, I did get back. It was bittersweet to, quit my job at the supermarket. Um, but I went back into the classroom a few years ago, and I love it. I love being in the classroom, especially in the classroom today. There are more needs and more behaviors in the classroom today than there ever have been. Um, and the system doesn't always support those children. And I always think Allah helped me with my son. He helped me in so many ways. He helped heal him when he was younger. He helped keep him safe throughout all these years. He helped me protect him. He helped me keep him healthy. He helped me feed him. He helped me put a shelter over his head. So I am going to make sure for the rest of my life that I help someone. It's not gonna come close to what Allah has helped me with, but I'm gonna try. Um, because I'm forever indebted to him.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Inshallah. May Allah bring those dreams to fruition. I say Ameen to your dua. Now, I've got a question for those people out there, women who might be thinking, oh man, I would love to go back to school, but in the USA, as you know, the cost of education is exorbitant. Do you have any tips of how to work the system?
I'm still trying to figure that out. Financial aid is great. I mean, there are resources to help. I mean, I only know with the education field. With the education field, and within the state of Michigan, there's a lot of grants and scholarships to help, especially currently because there's a teacher shortage in our state. So there's a lot of support and resources. So don't shut the door without looking into it. I shut the door for so many years saying I could never, I can't, it won't work. There's no way. How am I going to do it? But when I took that first step, subhanallah, Allah will just open it for you. He makes it easy for you. There's a saying I believe it's by Imam Ali alayhi salam, Allah will not change the state of a being unless you change the state of yourself.
That's
Something like that.
ayah in the Quran.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
God will not
So
change the
yes.
condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. Yeah.
Yes. And so I had to really remind myself of that and say, I can't just sit back and say, I need my life to get easier. I need my life to get more stable. I need my life to be more financially stable. I need if I'm not doing anything towards it. And so I took that first step and when I made that first appointment with the advisor, um, everything just became easier. The doors open and subhanAllah, everything works out. Like there are times, there was a time, I was without work for like a week and a half. I was transitioning between jobs. And within that week and a half, I obviously lost a lot of money because I was transitioning between jobs and I didn't have income. That month, my landlord at the end of that month called me for no reason. It was out of the blue. There was absolutely no reason for this to happen. I called him to say the rent is ready. And he said, no, it's okay. I'm waiving rent this month.
Subhanallah.
And I was like, why? I was like, what do you mean? And I don't know my landlord personally. I don't know anything, and he doesn't know me personally. There's no way for him to know the hardships I'm going through. There was no connection there. And I was like, what do you mean? And then he was like, it's okay. I'm waiving rent this month. And I kept arguing with him. I'm like, but no, I have it because it's also very hard for me to accept anything from anyone. So I'm like, no, I haven't. And he's like, nope, it's, you're good this month. So I looked up and I was like, I remember I was at a store at that time and I looked up and the people around me thought I was weird because my eyes watered. And I just took a deep breath and I go, subhanAllah, the money that I lost within that week and a half was equivalent to my rent, give or take a little bit. But I was like, wow, you know? So subhanAllah, I will worry. I won't, because I'm a human. I'll worry for like 24 hours when I'm faced with a hardship. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But I don't worry more than that because I really, really, and you can take me on this word for this. I guarantee you it will work out. Somehow, some way, it will work out. Things always work out. And it might not work out the way you think it worked out, but it worked out the way it was supposed to work out. There are things where I'm like, God, why did this happen? And then I'm like, okay, this is the way it was supposed to happen. And maybe there's khair behind this. So you really never know. When they say trust God's planning, truly, truly, they say take that first step, even if you can't see the staircase, do it because Allah's already there ahead of you. He already knows what's ahead of you. So take it. And that's really how I live my life because I don't stress about things. The things I stress about now is my son. I stress about him being a teen. I stress about, school for him. I stress about other kids around him, friends. That's what I stress about. Anything else, I really leave it to God. Because always, always, always works out.
Muna, if you have to look back, is anything that you would change?
No. The only thing is if there was a way to protect my son from any pain he went through, if there was a way to protect my son from any emotions that he felt that were in any way negative, that's the only thing I wish I could do for him. But no, because I know, inshallah, that everything I did had God in mind first. So I hope that inshallah, Allah will accept every decision I made.
Ameen. And looking forward, where do you see yourself in 10 years from now?
I don't even look forward to 10 years. I don't know. I honestly,
And what is your your desire, your vision for the future?
you know, my whole life changed within seconds of a text message. Before that text message, minutes before that text message, I had all kinds of visions and dreams. I had a whole plan. I had goals. And then I got a text message and it all went down and everything changed. So I no longer look ahead to a year from now, 2 years from now. I'm telling you, I'm graduating in 2 months. I have no idea what I'm going to do after 2 months. I'm probably going to change some kind of career or job, obviously, because, but I have no idea what that is. I didn't even, like, I don't even know. So I can't really say where I see myself from 10 years. I can only say that I hope in 5 or 10 years that my son and I are not astray from the path of Allah. I hope that this dunya does not take us away from what we're striving to do, which is to stay on the good and to stay on the right path. Because, as you know, with everything going on around the world, things are getting harder and there are more challenges out there. And it's even harder now to raise a good Muslim child than it ever was before, because there's so many different influences and so many different factors out there, that what you do in your home it matters, but your child is out there with so many different factors. So I can only pray that in 10 years we are still with the same mindset that we are today, inshallah.
I mean, Muna, I'm so inspired speaking to you. I pray and make dua that through you, that there are going to be hundreds and hundreds of children that benefit from you and your work. And
Thank you.
I make dua that Allah answers all of your prayers and grants you and your son tawfiq and the greatest good. I mean,
Thank you. I mean, I pray the best for you as well, and for all families. And especially, if I had to say one last message to all the women going through hardships, it does get easier and it does get better. Hardships won't go away, because we're always going to have hardships. But whatever specific hardship you're going through, that will get easier. Another one will come along. Another one will come along.
guaranteed.
Then that one will get easier. But don't ever lose that grip of hope. Because no matter what, Allah will never ever leave you. And even if you feel the whole world is against you and you feel nobody is knowing your truth, Allah has it maktub, it's written. The truth is there. So whether it's said today or whether it's said in the day of judgment, the truth prevails. Your story will be told. Your right will be there. Justice prevails. It's just you have to be patient, knowing it might not happen in our lifetime, you know. But have faith that you're not going to be denied it.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm
Thank
so,
you.
so grateful that you are here and so much to share. No, really, really, because it's like your voice is like a beacon of light in
Thank
this
you.
darkness that many people find themselves in, even if a person is not going through a relationship struggle right now, just like the whole international atmosphere. And for those that are sensitive, we feel it, like there's a lot of
Yeah.
darkness out there. So thank you for just being this ray of light in all of it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for giving a voice to everyone to be able to share stories. So God bless you for all the work you do.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.